Call to order. And welcome to meeting number 17 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Indigenous and Northern Affairs. I would like to start by acknowledging that I am joining you today from the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Chinantan nations. Pursuant to the motion adopted on June 9th, 2020, the committee is meeting for the purpose of receiving evidence on the subject matter of the Supplementary Estimates A 2021. Today's meeting is taking place by video conference. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. During this meeting, the webcast will always show the person speaking rather than the whole committee. In order to facilitate the work of our interpreters and ensure an orderly meeting, interpretation in this video conference is like a regular committee meeting. Choose on the bottom of your screen either floor English or French. If you are speaking in English, please ensure you are on the English channel. If you are speaking in French, please ensure you are on the French channel. As you are speaking, if you plan to alternate one language to the other, switch the interpretation channel so that it aligns with the language you are speaking. Before speaking, please wait till I recognize you by name, and when you are ready to speak, you can either click the microphone icon or you can hold down the space bar, as I'm doing now, while you are speaking. When you release the bar, the mic releases. It mutes. A reminder that all comments by members and witnesses should be addressed to the chair. Should any members request the floor outside of their designated time, they should activate their mic and state, as we heard, a point of order. If a member wishes to intervene on a point of order that has been raised by another, use the raise hand function. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly, and when you are not speaking, your mic should be on mute. If technical issues arise in relation to interpretation, or if you're accidentally disconnected, advise myself or the clerk, and the technical team will work to resolve it. We may need to suspend as we need to ensure all members are able to participate fully. Click on the top right-hand corner of the screen to ensure you are on gallery view. In this meeting, we will follow the same rules that usually apply to opening statements and the rounds for questioning of witnesses. Each witness will have up to 5 minutes for their opening statement, followed by the usual rounds of questions from members. And so now it's time to get to our witnesses. The Honorable Carolyn Bennett, Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations. The Honorable Mark Miller, Minister of Indigenous Services. The Honorable Dan Vandel, Minister of Northern Affairs. Minister Miller, I was informed that you would be starting, and you now have 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. As I am in Ottawa, I do want to acknowledge my presence today on the traditional territory of the Algonquin people. Good afternoon, bonjour. Before I begin, I want to say a few words on the current social climate. Right now, we are in a moment when Canadians are recognizing that there's unfairness built into our systems, that these systems have always been unfair towards Indigenous peoples. I look to my colleagues on this committee, among others, and across government to reflect and question ourselves on why injustice towards Indigenous people still happens and how we can move forward in the short, the medium, and the long term. This is obvious. We need to ensure that there's accountability and that policing services are committed to ensuring that they are always worthy of the trust we put in them. Indigenous peoples and their communities are entitled to the best that there is of the RCMP. And we need to constantly question and reflect on the issues of systemic racism in institutions, particularly those that hold exceptional powers, ones at times of life and death. The exceptional powers exercised by police services across Canada come with correspondingly exceptional responsibilities. We must keep fighting to remove the systemic racism from these institutions that are meant to serve everyone living in this country equally and fairly. With that, I welcome the opportunity to provide you with an update on our continuing effort to confront the evolving COVID-19 pandemic and to answer your questions on Supplementary Estimates A. As of June 15th, Indigenous Services Canada is aware of 247 confirmed cases of COVID-19 in First Nations communities on reserve. Of these, 208 individuals are considered to have recovered. In terms of Inuit in Nunavik, all the 16 cases reported have recovered. Our commitment to support communities in their response to COVID-19 has never wavered. That is why our 2020-2021 supplementary estimates, reflect a net increase of $1.7 billion. This was essential to address the needs of Indigenous peoples during this global crisis. These supplementary estimates include $950.5 million of statutory funding, mostly related to the COVID-19 response measures, in addition to new funding support of key programs such as Jordan's Principle and Child and Family Services. To date, the Government of Canada has made roughly $1.5 billion in distinctions-based funding available to Indigenous peoples and northern communities to support their efforts to successfully battle COVID-19. Specifically, these estimates contain more than $280 million to support Indigenous Services Canada's health response in First Nations and Inuit communities. This is essential funding that will help to provide First Nations and Inuit communities with additional healthcare providers, personal protective equipment, health and infrastructure, specifically retooling existing community spaces or purchasing mobile structures to support isolation, screening, and/or accommodations, and community-level infection prevention and control measures that are essential. In addition to this, these estimates also reflect $305 million for the Distinctions-Based Indigenous Community Support Fund, and of this amount, $215 million was dedicated to First Nations, $45 million to Inuit, and $30 million to Métis Nation communities, plus $15 million in proposal-based funding for First Nations off-reserve and urban Indigenous organizations and communities. An additional $75 million was also sought for organizations supporting First Nation individuals off-reserve and Inuit and Métis living in urban areas, as well as $10 million in funding for emergency family violence prevention shelters on reserve and in Yukon. Pardon me, Chair, as I switch the language. Don.
As part of our COVID-19 response, we are also providing $270 million to respond to financial pressures on income assistance for essential living expenses. Outside of funding to support our COVID-19 response, these supplementary estimates also include $232 million to support the ongoing implementation of Jordan's Principle and $468.2 million to support the ongoing delivery of the First Nations Child and Family Services Program. These investments demonstrate the government's ongoing commitment to fully implement the orders of the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal prior to September 2019. This investment more than doubles the program's budget, bringing it to nearly $1.7 billion. Funding will be used to ensure that First Nations children and families are getting the services they need.
Recently, these items will be reflected in future supplementary estimates. These include $75.2 million in new investments to support First Nations, Inuit, and Métis Nation post-secondary, recent graduates impacted by the pandemic, and $440 million in funding to support Indigenous businesses and the Indigenous tourism industry in response to the hardships created by COVID-19. I will close by saying that we are committed to responding to the needs of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis, and to stopping the spread of COVID-19. We're committed to getting more nurses, paramedics, to more nursing stations and health centers to help those who need it most. I want to take a moment as I close to thank all healthcare professionals working in Indigenous communities for their continued dedication and determination to ensure that quality and culturally appropriate care, testing, and treatment are provided during this pandemic. And I want to thank you again for this opportunity, all members, to meet with you, albeit virtually today. Again, I'm happy to answer any and all questions. Miigwech, nakumik, marci. Thank you, merci.
Thank you, Minister. And now we go to the Honorable Carolyn Bennett, Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations. 5 minutes, Minister Bennett. Minister, you're on mute. Minister Bennett, you're on mute. Your microphone is muted, Minister Bennett. There you go.
That didn't help. Okay. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am joining you today from my home in Toronto. on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. I would also like to recognize the traditional territories from which all of you are participating. I am pleased to be here today to speak to the Supplementary Estimates A, the estimates for Crown Indigenous Relations. Officials from Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs are also online to help respond to your questions, led by our Deputy Minister, Daniel Kwan Watson.
This has been an emotional time. We have all been upset by the images on our screens and the undeniable evidence of systemic racism in Canada. It is the basis of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and the over-incarceration of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. I know that everyone on this committee wants to ensure that Canada is investing in making amends for the past and putting in place the concrete actions to make real change. The estimates for CERNA include key initiatives and new funding, totaling approximately $748.7 million for Crown Indigenous relations. This funding will ensure that we can continue the concrete work to renew the relationship between Canada and First Nations, Inuit, and the Métis Nation to support their vision of self-determination and to advance reconciliation. The estimates reprofiles $481.2 million for the Federal Indian Day School Settlement Agreement and $260 million in 60 Scoop funding to ensure sufficient funds are available for individual compensation and to support ongoing administration costs of the settlements. In both cases, the reprofiled funds will ensure that there is no funding shortfall and that Canada can promptly make payments to survivors. As you know, the McLean implementation date was delayed as a result of several court appeals. $500 million have already been transferred to the 60 Scoop Claims Administrator, and the transfer of an additional $250 million of compensation will be determined once the total number of eligible claims is known. Eligible class members have now already started receiving partial payments of $21,000 each. The estimates also request $6 million to support the co-development of a national action plan in response to the issues identified in the final report and the calls for justice from the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. Our hearts are with the families of missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, Two-Spirit, and gender diverse people and the survivors. Our government, Indigenous leaders, survivors, families, and provincial and territorial governments are working hard to co-develop the National Action Plan that will set a clear roadmap to ensure that Indigenous women and girls and Two-Spirited plus people can be safe wherever they live. We will not let the families and survivors down. We have already put in place concrete actions to end this national tragedy, as documented on my department's website. We are grateful for all the work of all of our partners towards the National Action Plan. And as you know, prior to COVID-19, work to develop the plan was well underway, and Indigenous women's organizations had received funding to engage their communities. The funding and the estimates will further support national and regional Indigenous organizations, as well as the groups to engage with their members, families to engage in ensuring that the National Action Plan is accountable. As we have seen with COVID-19, better data is essential in being able to assess results. We are working to determine the appropriate indicators and the reporting by partners to assure an effective plan. This money that is in the supplementary estimates today will ensure that we will be able to measure, adapt for the next 5 years. We cannot let the families and survivors down. We promise concrete actions to stop this national tragedy. We owe it to them to be accountable for the results. I look forward to your questions. Thank you. Merci. Miigwech.
Thank you very much, Minister. And now for our third presentation, the Minister of Northern Affairs, the Honorable Dan Vandel. Minister Vandel. You're on mute, Dan. We need you to unmute. You're still on mute. Your microphone is muted.
That's weird. Okay, I'm good now. Kwe, Lukut, Tanchi, greetings and bonjour. You can hear me. I want to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from my office in St. Boniface, St. Vital, Treaty 1 territory, as well as traditional homeland of the Métis Nation, in a city that is now home to many Inuit. I'm happy to be here today with Minister Miller, Minister Bennett, to clarify and contextualize the actions the Government of Canada has taken and continues to take to assist Indigenous nations and all Northerners during this COVID-19 pandemic. And I also thank you for this opportunity to discuss the important work Northern Affairs is doing to confront and to mitigate the situation in regard to COVID in the North. And I'd like to take the time to thank the adaptability and professionalism of the public service who have been working under very difficult circumstances these last few months and their commitment to serving Canadians. We recognize that many Canadians are facing financial hardships and they are concerned for their health, their jobs, and their families. This is especially true in Canada's North. There are exceptional challenges in meeting the unique needs of Northerners in this pandemic. Les mesures de soutien, donc, je parlerai aujourd'hui.
The supports I will speak to today will augment ongoing funding and programs to help those living in remote and northern communities. These estimates include key initiatives and new funding totaling approximately $879.5 million. Of these amounts, $130.8 million is for Northern Affairs. This includes $15.9 million in Vote 10 grants and contributions for the north of Canada, of which about $10 million is to support research and higher education in Canada's north, and $6 million to support planning activities led by the government of Northwest Territories for the proposed Tolson hydroelectricity expansion project.
In COVID-19 pandemic, we have committed to additional investments and expanded measures and support for the North, which are included in these supplementary estimates. Our government's objective is to provide needed support to address the concerns facing the North, including support for health and social services, nutrition, as well as air transport. This is based on critical priorities identified by the territories to respond and prepare to the pandemic and to avoid the spread of the virus. We also recognize the increased costs of many essential goods in the North. Families are facing increased financial pressures and should not be worried about how to pay for nutritious food or essential household items. That's why we have committed up to $25 million to support enhancements to Nutrition North Canada, further safeguarding food security for people living in the North. This funding will help to ensure Nutrition North Canada fulfills its mandate to improve access to healthy foods through nutritional education and subsidies. By doing so, we will help to alleviate the cost of food in isolated communities. We have seen recently what this means on the ground, cutting the cost of flour in half and making milk more affordable so that people can afford a 4-liter bag rather than a 1-liter that they may have previously purchased. This support is in addition to the Harvesters Grant, which was developed in direct collaboration with Indigenous partners. This grant is helping Northerners access traditional foods by lowering the cost of getting out on the land. We have invested up to $72.6 million to address urgent healthcare, social service needs in the territories in response to COVID. And as you know, airlines are a critical link in maintaining the supply chain for the movement of essential goods and services. That's why we have provided up to $17.3 million to enable the continuation of Northern Air services supporting essential resupply and medical services in the North. We recognize the essential role of a focused and reliable air network plays in enabling the movement of essential goods and services in response to the pandemic. Les fonds ont déjà été...
Funding has been disbursed already for the urgent health care and social support needs in the territories in response to COVID-19 and to enable the continuation of Northern Air Services supporting essential resupply and medical services in the north. We continue to work closely with Indigenous partners as well as provincial and territorial governments to ensure that Northerners get through this difficult time.
And for this opportunity to be here today. Look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much to all of our ministers. And now we go to our questions. The first round is 6 minutes. And I have Bob Zimmer, Adam Van Couverden, Sylvie Berube, and Mumalek Kakak. Bob Zimmer, go ahead, please, for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is to Minister Vandal. Great to have you at committee today. It was well over 2 months ago that the Yukon and Northwest Territories and Nunavut Chambers of Mines wrote to you raising the issue of how non-revenue generating businesses like North's mineral exploration industry are ineligible for the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. As you know, Canada's mineral industry raises billions of dollars in revenue to explore, and yet due to the government's definition of revenue for Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, these businesses are still unable to access this program. Does the government plan on changing the definition of revenue for Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy to ensure our North's vital mineral exploration industry does not get left behind?
Thank you for that question. We recognize that mining is the economic backbone of northern communities, and we support mining industry workers and their families. Mining produces more than $3 billion in minerals annually, provides more than 10,000 direct and indirect jobs. So we are working hard to respond to the challenges posed by this pandemic. Emergency response payments, wage assistance, small business relief is flowing to meet the critical needs of those who require it. I've had a good meeting with the Chamber of Mines about a month ago. I'm working closely with the Minister of Natural Resources towards this issue, and I look forward to coming back with help that will be tangible and will be of aid to the mining industry.
Yeah, thank you, Minister, for that. I know it's urgent because coming from the mouths of the chambers themselves has said, you know, with short of tourism, mining is the industry, and they really need help. I just wanted to ask you about a specific line item in the estimates, and it's on page 220, and it's about its contributions for promoting the safe use, development, conservation, and protection of the North's natural resources, and promoting scientific development for Indigenous peoples and the North. The estimate to date is $147 million. The SUP-S is another 6.6 million on top of that. So the revised and total estimate is $153,792,914. And for that kind of a money, Minister, we're just wanting to know where that is going and what's that being spent on.
Yes, that's an excellent question. I will turn to the DM to clarify that question for Mr. Zimmer.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Thank you very much for the question. I believe that piece is not actually in the supplementary estimates today, but in the mains, if I understood the question correctly. And I'll get the EDM for Northern Affairs.
It's in the SUP-S. It's on page 220.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. And I just going to turn very quickly. The Assistant Deputy Minister for Northern Affairs works directly with that rather than take up more time myself. So, Serge Baudouin.
Is that answer still coming?
I believe it is.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was putting on the video, et cetera. Perhaps I wonder if our Chief Financial Officer would have the details of that in front of her. I don't have that figure in front of me.
Okay, if I could get that after committee, that would be much appreciated. Certainly, that's a lot of money, and just curious to know where that's being spent.
Absolutely, we will do that right away after. Sorry about that.
My third question, I'll get on with it here. Sorry, guys. Airlines are a key service in the North, carrying essential goods, services, medical supplies, and personnel to remote communities. Is the government planning to reduce the cost related to fuel excise taxes as recommended by the Northern Air Transport Association? What about other related fees like airport landing fees? Are any steps going to be taken by the federal government to assist our Northern Airlines in reconfiguring aircrafts in order to manage the risk of COVID-19 virus? Mr. Vandell?
Yes, that's an excellent question. I know that in April we announced $7.3 million to support a focused and reliable air network for all 3 territories, moving of essential goods, medicines, foods. The funding has been dispersed: $3.6 million to Yukon, $8.7 to the Northwest Territories, and $5 million to Nunavut. Those consultations are ongoing. I know the public service are meeting with the industry, as is Minister Garneau, to look at how we can further help the industry. Those decisions have not been made yet, but I know those discussions are ongoing, and I agree it's it's essential to the North.
Do you have a timeline when those answers will be forthcoming? I know some of these industries are hanging by a thread.
I don't have a precise timeline, but I would say sooner rather than later.
And what about the mining industry as well? I know that conversation is ongoing, but as you know, the window for exploration is very narrow. Usually, I'm even further north in British Columbia here. There's a solid 4 months where we actually would call it summer. And I know further north, it's even more limited. So I guess those answers, when do you expect to have those for the mining industry as well?
Those answers are I know the conversations are occurring. There's a lot of communication amongst different departments, the public service, and I hope those answers will be coming very soon.
How much time do I have, Chair?
7 seconds.
Well, there you go. Thanks for attending, Minister. Again, appreciate your efforts there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Zimmer. Now, Mr. Vancouverton, I have Ms. Zan, but I'm told that technically it's difficult. So, Mr. Vancouverton, you have the floor for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Chair, I think he's not here.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, you sound clear now, Ms. Zan. So can you go ahead?
I had to move downstairs closer to my contraption. So
go ahead.
Good. Glad you could hear me. Listen, just wanted to say thank you so much to the ministers for being here today. And I know it's been a very, very difficult time for all of us. And I know that you care deeply about the people of this country and the Indigenous people of this country. And, I just want to say we're all in this together, and we need to make things better for for the Indigenous people of Canada from coast to coast to coast. So, Minister Bennett, with respect to the co-development of a national action plan in response to the issues that are identified in the final report for the calls for, justice for the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls, will the investment of $6 million, is that like for a single year, or is it going to be ongoing funding? Is there going to be ongoing funding to support that process?
That is, I'm very pleased to report that will be for the ongoing for the next 5 years, in that we really do believe that in order to have a national action plan that is accountable for results, that we will have to be measuring and adapting the plan. We had always said it would be evergreenable, but working with our partners and the families and the survivors, the necessity of being able to update the plan regularly based on getting results is what the major part of that investment will be.
Thank you. And so how do you propose to go forward, or is this part of what we're actually waiting for now? So how are the families going to be involved as we move forward? I know I have one woman here, Tanya Brooks, who is a missing and murdered woman, and we walk every year in her honor, and the family lives here in Millbrook First Nation. So what do you suggest is the best way moving forward?
Well, I think that what a number of the families and survivors have said is that they also want to have an ability to influence their local the jurisdictions plan. So as each of the provinces and territories will have their own chapter and their own plan, as we were inspired by the local, the plan for the Yukon Territory, the First Nations, the families, the Women's Circle, together with the government, have developed a very impressive plan, and that we will be seeing that again in Nova Scotia, the families will be included, I think, coast to coast to coast, but also the organizations like Pautudik, the Michif Women, NWAC, all of those organizations will be also involving families as we go forward, and certainly this invest will make sure that families are able to help us improve the plan as we go forward over the next 5 years.
Thank you, Minister. So to get to the nitty gritty and the bottom of racism that is at the root of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, I mean, we have to take a look at the fact that it's about partly respect, that women, for one thing, are not seeming to be respected as equal citizens in the eyes of some men, and then you add on somebody who is racialized, and it's even more difficult for them. And anybody who's ever gone through a sexual assault of any sort, which many of us unfortunately have, know what it's like to be just an object and not actually thought of as a human being. What are your thoughts about what we can do as a government and as individuals and as members of parliament to be able to change that old-fashioned and really just despicable mentality?
I think, as we've seen over these recent weeks, but validating what Indigenous people have been experiencing in their lived experience forever, that this is something that has to be examined in each of us and in every institution in Canada. Certainly, when we began the pre-inquiry, to actually hear about the sexism and racism, not only in what they experienced in policing or in the justice system, but as you say, in a hospital or after a sexual assault, in education, in post-secondary, that this is everywhere.
Or I think even walking along the street.
And walking along the street. But, one of the things that really struck me at that time was to have a family with a daughter who's missing, if it got accidentally reported that the daughter was Caucasian, that the family would feel that they shouldn't correct it because they felt that the search would be less, it would be, oh, it's inevitable, but also the quality of the investigation, the charges that are laid, the plea bargaining, the sentencing, everything seemed to be different to the families if it was an Indigenous person that had been missing or ended up found murdered. And so I think that's that is their lived experience.
Right.
We're at time right there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Minister. I really appreciate that.
Okay, and now, Madam Beyrube, you have the floor. 6 minutes, please. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to thank the witnesses that are here before our committee. I would also like to thank the technicians and the interpreters that are essential to our work. And I'm the traditional territory of the Algonquin of the Bay James Naviki. So my question is for the Minister Bennett. Madam Bennett, in your mandate letter, you have a basic task to come up with an act to implement the UN Declaration of Indigenous People by 2020. The deadline is coming fast. Do you commit to put in a bill once Parliament comes back in September? With my colleague, Minister Lemary, it's very important as far as the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People.
Sorry.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. So with my colleague, Minister Lemati, as far as the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, our government is committed to introducing legislation jointly to implement the UN Declaration before the end of 2020. This commitment has not changed. We will be working in close collaboration with Indigenous partners, provinces, and territories, and other stakeholders on the best way to move forward the significant work and preparing the way for Parliament to respond to those needs.
On va pouvoir enfin reprendre nos travaux parlementaires.
If I understand you're saying we will be able to, so should I understand that we can begin parliamentary work in September to move this bill ahead? There doesn't seem to be any sound. I can hear you. Madam Bennett, I can't hear you.
We're not hearing the sound.
C'est mieux?
Oui, oui.
Is it better? Okay, I can hear you now. When Parliament begins sitting again in the fall, I hope that we will have a government bill with Mr. Lemaitre after the commitments are followed through with the Indigenous people. Thank you. I have another question. We know that the Métis and on the registered Indians are excluded from the collective agreements before 1960. What do you hope to do to eliminate some of the biases they have felt? Will they be compensated for the Métis Nation? It's very important for them to have a process themselves. And with the Canadian Métis Nation, to have a process that they can present to their citizens. So you're saying you will be working towards that to remedy the situation? Yes. Do I still have some minutes left, Mr. Chair? 1 minute, a minute and a half? You also said during a previous meeting of the committee that Ghislain Picard, the chief, said that he didn't have 8,000 houses. He needed 8,000 houses. And so he's asking for changes in improving the housing offer in his community. Madam Bennett. I can also answer Mr. Miller. That's fine. These capital investments in housing, our government has taken them seriously generally, but as far as investments in indigenous communities that we have made, but we must recognize that the housing units are not sufficient. And indigenous people are facing serious consequences. There is increased vulnerability to the COVID-19. So coming out of this pandemic, we must ask these questions. What's the level of capitalization? What's the level of undercapitalization that exists not only in Quebec but throughout the country? What can we do to improve the housing situation, the overcrowding we see in communities? And this applies to Inuit communities that are also vulnerable to this illness and other kinds of lung disease, especially when you're talking about COVID and tuberculosis we see in some communities. We all face this. We must make sure that we have adequate investments in indigenous communities to alleviate these difficulties. Thank you.
Ms. Kakak, you have 6 minutes.
Matna, thank you, Chair. Shout out to the IT team and translation for always being so great with all of us. Thank you to the ministers for being here today. I'm going to ask that you keep your responses to about a minute, just with my time crunch. My first two questions are for Minister Miller. The first, the Inuit Child First Initiative was meant to assist Inuit children and parents. Instead, we hear stories of unbelievable hoops that parents need to jump through. A woman from Iqaluit told Nunatsiaq News that she had applied 7 times, writing over 25,000 words, over 50 appointments with qualified professionals, and over 40 supporting letters, among many other items just in the application process. That is completely outrageous. We need to ensure Inuit children have access to fulfill their needs. What is being done to make this initiative work for children and parents?
I do thank the member for that very, very important question. I am very conscious about your time, and I do recognize that the Child First Initiative has been undersubscribed, and we need to deliver that flexibility. But I do want to allow the time for my Associate Deputy Minister, Valerie Gideon, to answer on that point. So, Chair, if we could pass that over to Valerie, please.
Please go ahead.
Very quickly, just to say that, the Inuit Child First Initiative right now is an interim approach. We are committed to working with the National Inuit Committee on Health on an approach that will meet the needs of Inuit across Inuit Nunangat. We are consistently approving requests. We've approved a number of requests under related to COVID-19 as well. But we do believe that working with the land claim organizations, there can be a simpler way to manage the initiative that would be led by Inuit for Inuit.
My next question, my colleague had brought forward a motion 174, the National Suicide Prevention Action Plan, in May of 2019. Part of that motion stated, and I quote, conducting within 18 months comprehensive analysis of high-risk groups, end quote. This was just over a year ago. We know that Nunavut has the highest suicide rate. What has been done and what is going to be done to assist communities that have needed such resources for years?
This is part of the undertaking that, as I was asked to serve as minister, that I undertook towards Indigenous peoples to move forward on a national suicide prevention strategy. One of the leaders in that area were the Inuit with their Inuit suicide prevention strategy. You'll note, member, that the 2021 supplementary estimates provide $5 million in new funding to support the continued implementation, specifically of the Inuit-led Inuit suicide prevention strategy. This is a long-term solution tailored by Inuit to deal with the effects of the prevention of suicide, and this is something that we is done through distribution of funds to Inuit Teprik Kanatami, which you're well familiar with, and the 4 land claim organizations. This is building, of course, as you mentioned earlier, on the first 3 years of the implementation, and this funding will continue to the strengthened suicide prevention strategies across the Inuit Nunangat.
I've heard comments from constituents that they wish that the federal government would react to our suicide crisis the same way we've been reacting to the COVID-19 pandemic. My next 2 questions are for Minister Bennett. There are institutions across the country that the federal government has refused to recognize as day schools, even though they clearly were. What was the reasoning to cut more people out of being able to access compensation? And when will you make sure everyone who has suffered from trauma through these programs is compensated?
Thank you very much for the question, and we believe that a lot of the agreements to date have been based on court action. We don't want anybody to be left out, and that we are committing to anyone that was a part of a day school or in harmed in any way just by going. And then, like all agreements, if there was physical or sexual abuse, all of these agreements make that part of the way forward for healing. And this is really very serious, and how we feel that we've moved with McLean, and now we will move on with others.
I can give you a list to make sure that we are including everyone. Bauktatit has requested $20 million to support 5 shelters across Inuit Nunangat and in Ottawa. In recent announcements, we have not heard of this inclusion, while we know that women in the North are 3 times more likely to experience violence. Over 70% of communities in Inuit Nunangat do not have safe spaces. The delay in response to the MMIWG report is nothing but disappointing. When will the federal government assist in providing the much needed safe space for Inuit women and girls?
Well, thank you. And, yes, thank you. Just making sure I'm on English. The member might have noted the undertaking of the government a couple of weeks ago to invest $50 million to women's shelters and sexual centers across Canada to help with their capacity over the long term. And this is something that does not exclude Nunavut. And this is a funding, and let me be clear about this, that works with CMHC to deliver that to the institutions and representatives that will administer it. And I have had successive talks with Bauktatit. This does not exclude their other ask, which is in relation to shelters across Inuit Nunangat, but this can be a partial answer to that request. And I'm encouraged by the discussions we have, but they will be ongoing as to their capital needs, and we are obviously dedicated to making sure that.
Thanks.
Chair, I know I'm well over time. Thank you.
Yep, I'm sorry. Thank you. And Mr. Viersen, you are first up on a 5-minute round.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to our guests and witnesses for being here today. And I also want to thank Mr. Pawlowski for giving us this great tour of his house, trying to find some headphones earlier. Appreciate that too. My questions will be directed to Minister Bennett. Thank you for being here. With 14 First Nations in my riding, the national inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls matters a lot to many of my constituents. One of the chiefs, Chief Billy Joe, lost his youngest daughter, Bella Labucan McLean, a few years back in Toronto. And initially, the Toronto police called her death a suicide. And then later that was changed to a suspicious death. But to this day, the family doesn't have any answers, and we continue to look for answers, and we're looking to have the response to the national inquiry help out with that. Your mandate letter calls for you to lead the response to the inquiry, but it appears that the National Action Plan launch has been postponed. Minister Bennett, can you confirm that it has indeed been postponed?
You're on mute.
This little gizmo is not working. I apologize. My little. Thank you for the question, and I think that Chief Lubacan and Bella's story is one that really underlines how much work we've got to do. This was a tragedy that happened here in Toronto, and I think that we are feeling now that the family liaison units that were set up at the launch of the commission itself are helping families and navigate the justice system in a better way and to be able to access healing. I think that there have been families where like the documentary that the FILU here in Ontario commissioned Audrey's story, where the chief commissioner did reopen, the chief coroner has reopened the case. But I think that, again, that this is about justice for the families healing for the families and survivors, as well as putting the concrete measures to stop this tragedy. Because this is the first ever national inquiry, it means that all the provinces and territories are working on their plan, their chapter, as well as the distinctions-based lens that will allow First Nations, Inuit, and Métis to have and the two-spirited and gender-diverse people have their own views in a national action plan. But I think, Arnold, the thing that really matters is that it works, that it can't be a national action plan that sits on a shelf. And that's why the money in the supplementary estimates today is so important, as it will allow us to choose the indicators, work with families and survivors, and make sure we're measuring, adapting, and getting the results, as we cannot let those families and survivors down.
When can we expect what date can we expect the release of this national action plan?
Well, we are working as hard as we can. I think, as I had said, when it became clear that we weren't going to make it this month, around the anniversary of the final report, that we will work continuously to be able to get the kind of report that the families and survivors will see is serious and accountable. And we are working with the provinces and territories, all of the provinces and territories. And in your province, Minister Wilson has been amazing. I spoke with the Alberta Advancement of Indigenous Women organization this morning, that there is lots of work to do, and we want to make sure that this is an effective plan that will stop this national tragedy.
Will your government be supporting all of the calls for justice from the inquiry?
Well, I think that's the issue now, is that we've received them all, and we are now engaging with our partners to develop a national action plan, which will outline the priorities of our partners to be able to put in place the concrete action to stop the tragedy. As you know, on our website there is a website which documents the actions to date, as we'd said that we wouldn't wait for the final report to put in place the kinds of things that Mamalek talked about, whether that's the kind of things around shelters, changes to child and family services, and what we're living right now with dealing with the racism and sexism in our institutions. The National Action Plan will... Okay.
I'm sorry, Minister, we're way over time, and I want to make sure everyone gets a chance. Also, to our speakers with the earbuds, the translation really needs to hear clearly, so some of you may need to move the microphone a little bit closer to your mouth to enable that. Mr. Batiste, you are next, and you have 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister Miller, within our budget, I was pleased to see an increase in funding for Jordan's Principle. I'd like to acknowledge the work that they're doing and the difference that these workers are making. Their work has been vital, both on and off reserve, to help those who've slipped through the cracks, whether in health, education, and a lot of areas where Indigenous people had nowhere else to turn but them. How will our recent funding help us reach full implementation of Jordan's Principle? And what are some of the challenges that have surfaced during COVID that we were able to address with this funding increase?
Thank you, MP Batiste, for really what is an excellent question and goes to the heart of some of the work that Indigenous Services Canada does. Chair, I will at the end of my statement pass the microphone over to ADM Valerie Gideon to show some of the daily work that we do at Indigenous Services Canada. I'm going to quote numbers, but behind those numbers are kids whose lives are being transformed by the implementation of this government of Jordan's Principle, and it's key to, as part of our work with First Nations, to ensure that this principle which is a sacred one, to be upheld, and that the children really have access to products and services that they support, they need, and have the right to have. The member has noted that there's the supplementary estimates provide $232 million in new funding to support this continued implementation principle. It brings the total budget for Jordan's Principle up to $668 million. This ensures that children receive access to health, social, and education products, services, and supports they need, as well as English, speech language, pathology, physiotherapy, mental wellness supports, education assistance, and mobility aids. And during this COVID period, those needs have become more acute as schools are shut down, as those needs become more specific to tailoring critical needs within the home, and that has put pressure on the system, but it's welcome pressure because it is something that we need to fulfill as part of our duty to Indigenous peoples. On that note, I will pass the microphone over to Valerie Gideon.
Valerie, 1 minute, please. I have another question.
Very quickly, just to say that we were able to actually provide services to children who would have normally relied on services being provided in school, and that would be the same with respect to food. For those vulnerable families, we were also able to provide some virtual mechanisms for families to be able to access supports. So, and that included laptop technologies, for instance, or anything that they required, including connectivity supports. So those are concrete examples of what we've been able to do through COVID-19. In terms of challenges, I would just say that I think the volume continues to increase. We had a 150% increase in the number of requests approved between 1819 and 1920, and we're going to continue to see that increase. So I think supporting First Nations communities and organizations to really be able to lead the way in terms of addressing gaps more systematically that children are confronted to would be a sustainable approach going forward.
Thank you, Valerie. Minister Miller, during COVID, mental health has been something we've heard a lot about in Canada. We've seen the most successful models are where the first intervention is done by the Indigenous people themselves, often in the Indigenous languages, through social media or through phone calls, instead of law enforcement. With the recent deaths to Indigenous Canadians in New Brunswick, I'm wondering if the minister can speak to how our government is making mental health a priority and what supports our government is doing to ensure that Indigenous models of intervention are being utilized.
Well, Jaime, this is something that we've seen throughout the pandemic is the increase demand for mental wellness support, the increase with that corresponding stress and anxiety, fear that COVID has created. And as you know, the solutions that are best led are those that are within community. As we look at the past weeks and we question whether really police should be doing a number of these interventions that turn on mental health situations, it's obvious and it jumps out that work needs to be done to ensure, and in short order, that these supports are provided even more so than they are today. Some of the examples that we've seen from our perspective in supporting mental wellness, there's been an increase of 52 community-led wellness teams since 2015, to 63 across Canada. The great example that we have is the great work being done by Anishinaabe Nations Choose Life Initiative, which is benefiting upwards of 22,000 high-risk youth and children. The implementation of the 24/7 Hope for Wellness helpline, and ITK's National Suicide Prevention Strategy that I mentioned earlier. These are all elements in a more broad implementation of wellness supports that we need to continue working on. We see that as in terms of budgetary pressure, but again, behind that are people that need the support, and particularly during COVID-19.
Thanks, Minister.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Batiste. We now go for 5 minutes with Mr. Vidal. 5 minutes, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I as well want to thank the ministers and all your officials for appearing at committee today. I know your time is valuable and you're busy. I firmly believe one of the primary functions of a member of parliament is to provide financial oversight, and scrutinizing government spending has got very difficult under the circumstances. In fact, this morning, the Parliamentary Budget Officer issued a report where he raised many flags about the government's lack of transparency and accountability, and identified how difficult it was for parliamentarians to do their job in light of the current conditions. So I want to make the best use of the time we have today. And again, I do thank you for being here. So my first question is for Minister Miller. Minister, Saskatchewan is currently in its third phase of reopening, and in fact, this morning announced the date for phase 4 of their opening. The government started announcing measures to help Canadian businesses way back in March, but unfortunately, many Indigenous businesses, Indigenous financial institutions, and urban Indigenous organizations were left out of those original announcements. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to speak with the general manager of a community futures organization that also acts as an AFI in northern Saskatchewan, and because of that, many of the businesses he serves are Indigenous businesses. He indicated to me that he finally received his community futures funds last Thursday, and only this week will he be able to actually disperse the funds to those businesses that truly need this help. Can you identify for me why it took so long for the funding to actually reach these businesses after the announcement on April 17th?
Thank you, MP Vidal, for that question. And before answering, I do want to highlight the excellent work that you've been in communicating with our office as to some of the things that you're seeing in the northern areas of Saskatchewan. The excellent work that you have done with our teams in supporting all the work that's been done in La Loche, which was an extremely concerning situation. On your question, and it's an exceedingly important question, that we've been rolling out measures and programs in record times, and the last thing we wanted to do is leave Indigenous communities behind, and that includes business support. These are things that ordinarily would go through a very long process, and as you recognized, they've been compressed into a very, very, very tight time frame. The importance for us when announcing things was to ensure that potential recipients, knew they had the backing of the Government of Canada. We announced $306 million of specific Indigenous funding, knowing that Indigenous businesses were best served through the 59 AFIs across the country, as well as last week where we announced an additional $117 million specifically in loans, and ones that would be for the most part forgivable, to ensure that there was that support in place. Now, the timing of these things can always be scrutinized. Again, this is something that this committee plays a key role in doing, and Parliament plays a key role in doing. But in terms of timing and the ability of government to move on a dime, I'm quite proud of the work we've done. Has it left? I can speak to a specific situation that you're highlighting, and I absolutely would like to look at my team with that. But communities know that the Government of Canada has backed them financially, and will continue to do so as we chart the path of COVID-19, which most experts still don't have the capacity to fully predict, and we do have to acknowledge that uncertainty as we take measures in a very precipitous fashion.
Thank you for that, Minister. I would just comment that from many of the people I've talked to, it seems that some of the Indigenous businesses and the support for them, it's almost like it came as an afterthought and wasn't part of the original consultation. So that's just some of the criticism I'm hearing from people on the ground, and I pass that on. I'm going to move on to my second question as well for Minister Miller. As you're well aware, Northern Saskatchewan is home to many friendship centers that offer essential programs to urban Indigenous people. In March, the government announced the application-based process for urban Indigenous organizations to receive funding, which you referred to in your comments today. The concern I heard from friendship centers that it was weeks before they heard from government and then received a small fraction of what they'd asked for. On May 21st, you did announce some additional funding for urban Indigenous organizations, but again, I'm hearing from these people on the ground that that could be potential recipients that have great work to do, that they've heard nothing from the government since the announcement, and there's no idea of the timing or the outcome of this. Can you clarify for us and for these organizations when they might actually get answers and when they might see some of this additional funding to support the urban Indigenous people in their communities?
Less than 10 seconds, I'm sorry.
Oh, wow. Look, Gary, this is very important. I mean, we made this $50 million commitment in an area, frankly, of jurisdiction that is shared between municipalities and provinces and the federal government. And we realized quickly the federal government had to step up. So in addition to the 15 million, we announced an additional 75 million going into urban Indigenous centers, serving peoples that frankly need to be served by all members in all jurisdictions and provinces and territories. And it is a gap that we have tried to fill as quickly as possible. It doesn't necessarily fill into the normal mandate of Indigenous Services Canada, but it's something we have to reflect on. It hasn't prevented us from moving. It hasn't prevented us from investing. And if you have a particular case that you would like to address, I'd be glad to get back to you.
We're way over
be
time.
deploying those funds.
We need to move on. I'm sorry, Minister. We can go to Mr. Vancouverton for 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And before I start, I'd just like to acknowledge that I'm on the sacred territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat, many First Nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. My questions will focus on youth, and my first question will go to Minister Miller. We know that when Indigenous communities and Indigenous nations move towards self-governance and self-determination, they have better outcomes across the board, whether that's in health or education or in other ways. But part of this involves supporting effective community governance in First Nations. So how will the $24 million allocated to the band support program and these supplementary estimates help those First Nations move towards that self-determination and better outcomes for kids?
Thank you so much for that question. It is, when we speak about self-determination, the tendency in government is to speak in broad brushstrokes, almost philosophical brushstrokes. We speak of the critical importance of UNDRIP, but you, I think, brought it to its core, and I spoke earlier to it when I addressed issues on Jordan's Principle. When you talk about building nationhood, you speak about a number of pillars: security and control over land, over people, the ability of having control over your healthcare and your education, and those are the pillars that you look at as part of nation building on the terms that are told to us by the Indigenous peoples that are renewing that nation-to-nation relationship with us, and kids go to the heart of that. The painful realization when we talk about reforming child and family services is we talk about care, control, and custody over things that someone like I do take for granted, and has been taken away from Indigenous peoples, and it is a difficult topic for all of us to speak about, but most certainly Indigenous peoples, and making sure that families have the supports they need, making sure that within a governance process that you alluded to, that we continue to support self-determination, continue to support the governance tables that Minister Bennett is in charge of. It's so important in being able to speak to issues that I take with respect to government as granted, and is looked at in a different perspective in the Indigenous community. Indigenous children are a immensely growing part of the population, and this is a generation that cannot be left behind. But I don't dictate those terms. The terms need to be told to me, need to be told to us, and we need to work in partnership. It perhaps sometimes makes things slower and more difficult, but it is the right way to proceed. And I simply want to conclude for thank you for that important question.
Mr. Chair, do I have a few minutes left?
2 minutes. 2 minutes.
Thank you. You took the second half of my question out of my mouth a little bit with respect to what National Chief Bellegarde has said on this committee and many times elsewhere as well, with respect to the growing population of youth Indigenous communities across the country. So my question, I hope to focus on them because indeed they are the future of Canada, and their success is so vital to everybody's health and well-being across the country. So I suppose my question is mostly, how do we do more by doing less? How do we support people by stepping back and ensuring that the programs that they develop are culturally relevant and important to them? And how do we ensure that self-determination and that self-governance while taking more of a supportive role or a background role? What does that look like?
Maybe I wouldn't mind just saying that the example that we use all the time is from Eskasoni, where 20 years ago when they took control over their own education system, 20% of the kids were finishing high school. Now it's above the national average in the 90%. So we know that that's what works, and that it is when they have the culture and the language part of the secure personal cultural identity. We know these kids do better, and that is the future.
Yeah, I think that sense of belonging and that sense of like nationhood is one of the most important things. So my question then to maybe one of the
time is pretty much up. You only have 6 seconds left.
That's it. Thank you.
No,
everybody.
you don't have any seconds left. Thank you. Madame Michaud, vous avez la parole.
You have 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses. It's always good to welcome ministers in our committee. I'd like to mention that I'm on the traditional territory of the Mi'kmaq in Amqui. Amqui means in Mi'kmaq the long summers. I'm very pleased to be here with you today, and my question is for Minister Miller. In your speech, you said that more than ever, the Canadians are seeing the injustices that are against the Indigenous people in Canada. Many people are still left behind. In the money that has been allocated, is it sufficient for reconciliation and for rebalance the system during a crisis as the one right now? We know that inequalities increase, especially within certain communities. The money invested in the Community Support Fund for Indigenous communities, is that sufficient? First of all, thank you. I'd like to thank your leader for his intervention today when he relayed the voice of Chief Picard on the importance of Indigenous police and others. This is very important for us to mention that in Parliament. Is there enough money? The answer is a little bit mitigated by the fact that we noticed that we failed with regards to inequalities. Indigenous communities face many difficulties since the beginning of the crisis. Asks that were made had to do with overpopulation, a lack of housing, a lack of investment in education, in healthcare. These were asks that were made to us and to provincial governments. We have failed, so we've had to invest more money and resources in some communities that would not be necessary if they weren't like that they needed. So, for example, extra mobile installations to help in those communities. We've had to mobilize resources. The resource mobilized, is it enough? We will know after the fact if it was enough. We've had results in reserves because few people were infected. However, we have an unpredictable epidemic, and there's the fear of subsequent waves. Thank you.
Ms. Gazan, for 2.5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and it's nice to see the ministers here today. My question is for Mr. Miller. Talking about systemic racism, I'd like to start with your government. My question is, are there provisions in the 2020-2021 supplementary estimates that provide for the cost of complying with the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal ruling to immediately stop racially discriminating against First Nations kids? If you could limit your response, because I have a limited amount of time. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. As to the budgetary requirements in order to implement Jordan's principle, absolutely yes. I noted previously in an answer that those sums were and please, my staff can correct me or my officials can correct me if I'm wrong, an increased amount of $200+ million. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not talking about the 700 million, as that is not certainly identified to pay for the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal ruling. And with all due respect, you know, your government has spent between $5 and $9.4 million fighting First Nations kids. And I'm wondering if you have that money to spend fighting little kids in court, why is there nothing in your budget to ensure that little children are afforded basic human rights and to pay what you owe and have been ordered by the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal ruling children are asking? So if you could respond, please.
Less than a minute.
Well, thank you. And I would invite a longer, more complete answer should the time run out. You would have to specify which order. If you were speaking about the current negotiations that the court...
I'm talking about the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal ruling in which you are on your 10th non-compliance order.
Yes.
I'm asking if you have any plans to follow the law or if you're going to continue breaking the law.
Well, the member will note that we are fulfilling those orders, and that is why we have those budgetary amounts with respect to Jordan's Principle. They are so key. Currently, we are working with all sides to perfect some of the funding models that have been asked by the court for us to do, and we've made good progress. And so I should have an
with all due
update
respect,
for members
that is not
shortly.
the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal ruling does not agree with that.
And thank you for that. We're right at time, and that brings me to Mr. Doherty. 5-minute round of questions. And Todd, I hope your microphone's good and ready to go for 5 minutes. I think you're on mute. I'm sorry, I'm not hearing Mr. Doherty.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Does that work now? You can hear me clear? Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the ministers. Thank you to the IT for fixing the issues that we had, the technical issues earlier on. I do want to thank my colleagues for allowing me the opportunity to be on this call. I will direct my questions to Minister Bennett throughout my 5 minutes, as I haven't had an opportunity to work with Minister Vandal and Minister Miller in their current capacity. Minister Bennett, would it be fair to say that over the last 5 years, you and I have had an open dialogue about the Indigenous issues within my riding?
Absolutely.
Minister, dating back to January of 2016, you and I have talked, whether it was regarding the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, or the Highway of Tears going right through my riding, or the June 2014 Supreme Court decision, landmark decision of Aboriginal title, the Williams case. We've had numerous discussions regarding that. Is that correct?
Yes, and I think that we were able to make investments in the Highway of Tears, and I think that we have had a good working relationship with Chief Alphonse, and who I know is a friend of yours.
He is, which is why these conversations are always delicate. Minister, anywhere in the supplementary estimates I was looking, as we know that some of the issues with respect to the missing and murdered Indigenous women are a result of a lack of safe and reliable transportation within our rural and remote areas, with Greyhound's exit from Western Canada, as well as no reliable bus service. Is there any funding for rural and remote transportation in your supplementary estimates?
I think that, again, that this is not in the Crown Indigenous Relations portfolio, and I don't know if there's anyone on the call. I think it is something that communities are working at in their funding to try and find safe transportation for their community members to and from urban centers, and I think we know that is a priority for many communities.
Thank you for that, Minister. Minister, as you know, the June 2014 Supreme Court decision where with the Williams case on Aboriginal title for the Siciltine First Nations, there was no duty of care granted to the non-First Nation residents and business owners located within the 1 million acres. What has your government done to address this issue?
Well, as you know, that as we begin those conversations towards self-government with the Siciltine Nation, that becomes very much part and parcel of those conversations as we go forward in terms of the communities nearby. I know that it is done differently with different nations, and that this is something that we look forward to working with you about.
Minister, over the last 5 years, I've personally provided you with evidence of harassment, intimidation, even as far as intimidation at gunpoint and growing tensions within my region between non-First Nations and First Nations. And I've still, you've still refused to act. Why is that?
Well, again, I think that this is for my responsibility is about building a relationship and trying to have durable solutions in all of the regions across the country. I think that in terms of policing and jurisdiction, that also becomes provincial in terms of how people end up seeking justice on both sides. So I again commit to doing what we can together to make sure that people feel safe.
Thank you. We're right at time there. And I have Mr. Pawlowski next, but I don't see him. Having toured his home earlier, I'm not seeing him in that particular room. So I'm going to ask Mr. Batiste if he could step in now and carry on for this 5-minute segment. Jaime?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is for Minister Bennett. As we look to rebuild after COVID-19, we're looking to build back better, and we've heard from many witnesses that the normal on reserve is far below the Canadian standard. Many witnesses have stated that in order for First Nations to grow and not rely on government, they need to access financial capital and loans to be able to grow their economies. I'm wondering, as part of our efforts to move forward, is there the ability for us to also include First Nations government in that in terms of their ability to grow by forgivable loans, interest-free loans, as we've seen as part of the COVID money?
I think that Minister Miller would be in a better position to answer this, as we are certainly have been investing in self-determination and nation rebuilding. But I think in terms of that kind of support, that has been coming from Indigenous services.
Yeah, and MP Baptiste, I think we've seen a real increase, particularly on the west coast of but moving east of the use of 10-year grants. They're very important to creating that predictability and ability to look over 10 years as to what the needs in communities are. My mandate letter, as well as a number of other ministers, contained undertakings towards Indigenous people in closing the infrastructure gap. We work with communities. Our regional directors work on the 5-year infrastructure plans that are key to the planning of communities. It's something I think we need to take a look at as we take stock and say, what is the new normal? What are the needs within communities to ensure that they thrive, that they grow, and that we can continue the nation-to-nation relationship. That includes looking at financial instruments that I guess non-Indigenous communities take for granted or are available and haven't necessarily been available. And a number of the issues that we face on a daily basis as communities choose to get out from under the Indian Act. Again, these are slow discussions, but they are deliberate ones, and they are very important in order to make sure that community decision-making, nation decision-making is not made from Ottawa, but indeed made by the peoples and the nations that we are trying to improve our relationship with.
Thank you, Mr. Miller.
Maybe Jaime, if I could just add that I know that you know well the First Nations Financial Authority, and during this time we did provide them with $17.1 million so that they could deal with some of the First Nations with existing loans and work in partnership with them to make sure that any potential trouble was ameliorated.
Okay, thank you very much. The band support funding is certainly good to see. Another $24 million on top of the $48 million delivered to 222 First Nations, but it was intended as an interim measure. Now, I know that I've reached out to both ministers on the wage subsidy and making sure that Indigenous businesses are eligible. However, at some of the Indigenous leaders I've heard from are saying that CRA have been telling them that they're not eligible because they don't pay into taxes. I'm just wondering if there's an ability to reach out to CRA and to work between departments and figure out why some Indigenous businesses are being told that they aren't eligible when our government has said that they should be.
Yeah, and this is something that we have been struggling with from the very beginning. There was never any intention to exclude band-owned businesses, for example, or the supports to Indigenous communities. There were a number of modifications that were needed to be made in order to affect that. And if it's an issue of clearing that up with CRA, absolutely. And sometimes it is on a case-by-case basis, and it depends on the business eligibility that all Canadians are struggling with. But this is something that we can work with on a case-by-case basis with CRA.
Okay, thank
20
you.
seconds.
That's it. I can.
Good. Okay, that's fine.
Good.
Thank you. Mr. Vidal, you have 5 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In addition to the limited scrutiny and transparency that I talked about in my earlier round of questioning as identified by the PBO this morning, the House of Commons is no longer actually sitting, and because of that, I'm not able to ask or submit order paper questions. So this question might be one that I would normally do as an order paper question, but I'm going to ask it in this forum, and it's for Minister Miller. Last week, I spoke with Chief Peter Bill of the Pelican Lake First Nation in my riding. He expressed his concern that the carbon tax is raising the cost of fuel, heating fuel, and other goods on his First Nation and making life more expensive for members of his First Nation. Minister, can you tell me how much carbon tax revenue the Government of Canada is collecting directly from First Nations across Canada?
I cannot personally. I would ask if any officials on the line, perhaps our CFO could answer that, or GF.
Normally the product, if I remember well, it's the product off reserve would be taxed. I'm not sure we're taxing on reserve product per se that are sold on reserve. So we can follow up and try to give you the information. And if we do, that's not an information that I have at the moment. But I would doubt that the CFO would have that information.
You know, I appreciate that maybe you don't have that at your fingertips. And if you could clarify for me that yeah. You know, if the chief is wrong, that would be good. If he's correct, if
I
you
will
could
never
provide
say the
me
chief is wrong.
Sorry, if you could provide me a number of that in follow up, that would be appreciated as well. And then I can take that answer back to the chief and just provide it to him directly. Minister Miller, to you as well. The last time this committee reviewed estimates, I think it was the main estimates, I'd questioned you or talked to you about the department and the implementation of C-92 and how that was going and whatnot. In these supplementary estimates now, there's an additional $468 million that's identified as C-92 implementation. Can you identify for us how many First Nations have applied to take control over their child and family services? I understand that they have to indicate their intent and as part of the application process. How many have actually started down that journey?
Yes, and thank you for the question. A very important one as part of my mandate, but most importantly for communities that want to take that jurisdiction and assert their right to self-determination. We do have a number that have applied that specific.
Going with your mom. She's outside.
MP Batiste forgot to put it on mute, but that's I would defer to my department if they can disclose a specific number at this time. If not, we can undertake to get back to you, Jeff, if you can answer, please.
It's let me come back to you on this because there's a lot of them who express interest, which doesn't mean that they formally send us a demand. We have received some actually over the last few weeks. So in order to make sure that we've got the more accurate numbers, I would prefer to make sure that we've got all of them and give you a sense of the ones who express interest, who wants to engage with us. And some of them would say that they're not necessarily expect to get there with taking jurisdiction in the next few years, for example, which is different than the ones who will say that in a year from now, they expect that they will actually take jurisdiction. So that's the difference. So I would try to separate those two, do the triage, and we can respond to you by writing.
And also, Gary, I would just like to say that in a lot of the negotiations on self-determination, that child and family is quite often at the top of the list as the incentive to really take back that jurisdiction. The child well-being law with the Anishinaabe Nation here in Ontario, we did sign an agreement with the hereditary chiefs at Wet'suwet'en with some, and so there is a real need to bring their children back in really all of the negotiations that we're doing.
No, and I appreciate that. And if you wouldn't mind also including for me just maybe some idea of kind of how we are tracking against the targets that have been set. I think I have time for one quick question, Mr. Chair. If I
30
watch
seconds.
my clock.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Minister Miller, in your presentation, you talked about the $270 million that is for income assistance for people on reserves, or the income assistance program that you added $270 million to. In the news release, it talks about this also helping to hire additional staff to better serve First Nations communities and connect individuals to other government programs. I'm just curious if you could identify how much of that $270 million was actually getting to the ground on the First Nations to help with income assistance, and how much was internal resources to add staff and administration to that?
Gary, that's the whole 30 seconds. Could you respond to that in writing, Mr. Miller? Because
I will. We plan to deploy this shortly, and I would note one nuance though, is that there is probably most likely, obviously, as people in Canada, regardless whether Indigenous or not, have suffered income challenges. We have to manage for additional caseload. So some of the elements that you may see may reflect that, but I would note that sensitivity as we get back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sure, thank you.
I'm having problems juggling the speakers list as well for technical and other reasons. I have Ms. Demoff ready to our next Liberal speaker for 5 minutes. Pam, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. And actually, after giving us all a great laugh, Jaime had with his kids at home, I'm actually going to pass it over to him for the next question.
Go ahead.
Yes, and I want to apologize. It's hard life being a single dad sometimes and balancing all that. But, on a serious note, we've all been hearing about the institutional racism that exists in Canada. I've been frustrated myself and deeply concerned in what I'm hearing from chiefs that I've reached out to who have lost community members because of what's going on. And, they've talked to me and pleaded for justice and change. And I'd like to get a sense from the ministers, especially Minister Vandal, who's an Indigenous person as well. Can you give us a sense of, what's happening now and what we're doing to address systematic racism and what we're doing to decolonize some of our institutions?
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jaime. Thank you so much, Jaime. Can you hear me, everybody? For that, that's a great question. First of all, I want to say clearly that the images that we've been seeing on television for the last couple of weeks, whether it's in Nunavut or Alberta, or in the Maritimes or in Minneapolis, are absolutely unacceptable. For me personally, they're revolting. It's something that really our country, our society can no longer put up with. I'm talking to you from Winnipeg, and when I first started to get involved in community issues and politics, there was something called the Aboriginal Justice Inquiry that was that kicked off in Winnipeg in the late '80s. Judge Murray Sinclair presided over it, and 4 years later, there was a big book of recommendations on how how we work ourselves out of it. And successive governments since that time have done something. Others have not done anything. And the bottom line is 20-some years later, there's not a lot of change in the city of Winnipeg. We've had 3 shootings of young Indigenous people in the last 6 months, and that's unacceptable. So since then, of course, we've had the calls to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Committee. We've had the missing and murdered inquiry into girls and Indigenous girls and women. And I think government's been shown the way, all levels of government over successive years. And what we really need to do is to act upon them and do something more dramatic that hasn't been done in a long time. And there are no simple solutions. There is no silver bullet that's going to turn all of this around. We have to take collective action. We have to take a whole of government approach, and we have to take a whole of society approach. And that's the way to do it. Try to answer your question. I know that our government has spent unprecedented amounts, at least $25 billion in new money in Indigenous education, in to try to change education, healthcare, infrastructure, to try to change those social determinants of health, to let young people have a better chance out there. But it's not just the Indigenous population, it's the non-Indigenous population that have an even greater responsibility. And it's really built into our colonial system, where our first three policy objectives as the Government of Canada was to civilize, to Christianize, and to assimilate Indigenous people into Canadian life way back when Canada was formed. And that's really the basis of the racism. It needs to stop, and it needs a dramatic government intervention. And I hope our government will be able to lead the way, because the images that we saw of police brutality are absolutely unacceptable. We need to stop the hate, the violence, and we need to stop the racism.
Thank you. Do I have time for any of the other ministers to answer that, Bob?
I got 45 seconds. Someone can try.
I don't think I could say it any better than what Dan said. Maybe Carolyn has some words.
Well, that's fine.
I just think that as we look to other models of policing that are community based and First Nations led, that is the work that Minister Miller and Minister Blair and all of us will be helping with as we look to the success of Kwalindun and what happens when you have trusted people who know the community and can drop the calls to the RCMP by 30%.
And that does bring us to time. And thank you very much. We have a 2.5-minute round now. And Madame Michaud, vous avez la parole.
Merci, monsieur. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I didn't have time to thank Mr. Miller for his good words for my chief, my leader. I will pass them on. But what's important is the words of Mr. Picard saying that in 3 months, police intervention have made more victims than COVID itself, which is incredible. It put in perspective several problems. 14 reports of inquiry commissions since the year 1960s with terrible conclusions. The conclusions are always the same. We've known the problems and inequalities and injustice for a long time, and still we see it seems that it's only today that we want to get into solution mode. So I want to know what has been done so far to solve these problems financially. It's not a matter of just putting money on the table, but what has been done so far? Of course, we're all taking act of the situation. We are outraged. You've seen me on TV being outraged in the last few weeks. But yes, time is for action now. Since the inquiry, we started taking action, especially concerning the conclusions about the police services. Those calls for actions are not only the matter of the federal government, but also provincial governments, because they also have to control their police services. There is short-term, mid-term, and long-term work to be done. We know that for a long time, First Nations have been asking more police services, but police services that would be Indigenous in their community. I know many communities that have people who have served in the army and in the police, and they don't have police services, their own police services in their community. It's not acceptable. As a minister, 3 on the phone today told me that the time is for action. It's not something we can do over time. But it's a work that, like Mr. Vandal said, that will have to be done in the midterm, and we have to reform the police services. And that promise was made 2 years ago. Thank you. Have you any?
You're up. We're way over time, and we have Ms. Gazan. You are up for 2.5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is for Minister Bennett. On April 11, 2016, you promised this very committee that your government was committed to put an end to long-term water boil advisories on reserve within 5 years. On June 11th, 2019, you promised water boil advisories would end by 2021. Clearly, your government is going to be breaking another promise to Indigenous people. I looked on the website, and it has not been updated in terms of water boil advisory since February 15th, 2020. That was prior to COVID. In the estimates, you allocated $6,832,500 approximately for capital investments. How much of that $6 million will be invested to end water boil advisories? If you could limit your response just because of the short amount of time. Thank you.
I would perhaps note that this is a question that would most likely have been should have been directed to me, since Indigenous Services Canada is in charge, in addition to the communities that are affected in eliminating those boiled water advisories. I believe what you have said to be correct, that there has been no public update since March, and perhaps that was the end of February. We have continued to invest in ensuring that short-term water advisories do not become long-terms, and those that are on the list, and indeed the ones remaining are the most complicated. But I would note that since even December 31st, 2019, we've invested more than $1.4 billion of targeted funding to support over 600, rather as of December 31st, 2019, to support 602 wastewater projects, including 276 that are actually now completed. So and these projects serve about 500,000 people that are First Nation communities.
Just one last point. I mean, with COVID, we now know it's more urgent. This is a very clear human rights violation, willful. What is your plan? How long is this going to take? This is a life and death matter.
Our plan is, MP Gazan, is to eliminate the long-term water drinking advisories on reserve.
Yeah, when? By when, Minister?
We continue aggressively to meet that spring 2021 date that we've set, and my team is working around the clock despite COVID to keep working on that date. These are community by community decision making, and we are engaged with those communities to ensure they have the supports they need, even in the face of communities that have decided to close down. We want to make sure that they do have that supports to support what is properly best described as an essential service.
Well, thank you. At this point,
thank you very much.
Thanks, Ms. Gazan. You'll recall that we were very late getting started for a number of technical issues, and I said that I would ask the committee. We need unanimous consent to continue after the hour. So is it the wish of the committee to continue to fill out our round of questioning? Any comments? Does anyone have issues that would not enable them to? Pawlowski says yes. Viersen, are you good? Okay, I'm going to assume that we're all in favor. Okay, so I'm going to ask that we carry on now for the remainder of the questioning round, which is a 5-minute round, followed by a 2.5-minute round. And Mr. Viersen, you are up for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My questions continue with Minister Bennett. Thanks once again for being here, and I also want to thank the IT folks for making this all happen. And I'm definitely looking forward to doing this in person back in Ottawa soon. Minister Bennett, we were talking about the last time I had the opportunity to ask questions about the national inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Over 50% of the victims of human trafficking in Canada are Indigenous women and girls. And under the master list of report recommendations, there's theme 14 and theme 14A, and the need to address human trafficking of Indigenous women. Are you familiar with those two themes? You're on mute.
Yes, I think that as you've followed and have led, that human trafficking is one of the most heinous crimes, and Indigenous women and girls are very much overrepresented in this terrible crime.
One of the key recommendations consistent in both of these themes is to focus on the prosecution of pimps and johns rather than the prostituted and trafficked women. Do you agree with the National Inquiry's recommendations to focus on the demand rather than targeting the supply?
I think that the government, as you know, has launched a new comprehensive national strategy to combat human trafficking in all its forms, as well as protecting the victims who are the most vulnerable. But this is $75 million in additional investments. The national strategy to combat human trafficking will be able to increase Canada's ability to fight this attack on basic human rights and dignity.
Well, will any part of the National Action Plan, in response to the National Inquiry, will it have a piece around human trafficking, sex trafficking, or modern day slavery?
Absolutely. This is, again, very important in terms of responding to the national inquiry and the work that will be done with the provinces and territories as well. I know as a physician that one of the areas that we really need to do better on is to educate frontline health workers as to be suspicious of perhaps that this young woman who comes with another person might be the victim of trafficking, and we need to be able to have people think of it. If you don't think of it, then you don't diagnose this, and you don't actually find that person a way out.
Minister Bennett, part of your mandate is about restoring the relationship between Canada and First Nations. I have been in the COVID committee asking Minister INAN about the procurement process in Canada. Have you been facilitating procurement at all of PPE with First Nations communities and the federal government?
I do not sit on the COVID committee, but Minister Miller and Minister INAN are working together, and I know you'll have the opportunity to ask them both that on Friday.
So you have not been, your office has not been facilitating any Indigenous companies that are looking to supply PPE to the federal government. You're not aware of any those kind of conversations?
I think that I am not aware that those companies have approached our office, but I would certainly be supportive of getting people to the right places. As you know, many companies have approached not only Minister Baines but Minister INAN, and we do think that the kind of response that Indigenous communities have done, even in the kind of cloth face masks, that I've been so impressed with what they've been able to do for their communities, but I am not aware of what that link to the federal government procurement has been.
Are you aware of any Indigenous companies that have a contract with the federal government?
I am not aware of that. I know that you've asked that question in the House of Commons, and I hope that we can find that for you.
Hello, Arnold.
Minister Miller?
MP Viersen, yes, thank you for that. In fact, I would probably encourage a more developed question, or at least more time to respond on Friday. We do have a number of examples. They're too few, but clearly it is something we're very aware of and moving to make sure that we do fill that need and demand from Indigenous PPE providers.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Mr. Viersen. Ms. Zan, your 5 minutes are ready to go. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thanks again, everybody, for all of your questions. Really good and respectful questions on the committee, and also very interesting answers from the ministers. I really appreciate it. So I want to talk again about self-governance. And we know that when Indigenous communities move towards self-governance and self-determination, that they really have better outcomes right across the board. Jaime can tell us that with education, for instance, and also with healthcare. And one would imagine with policing, if we can go in that direction and prevent all these terrible atrocities that are really happening, too, in New Brunswick, just in the last while, where health wellness checks, where people ended up with 5 bullets in them or 2 bullets in them. It's just terrible. So my question involves the $24 million that was allocated to the band support program in the supplementary estimates. That was to help First Nations move towards self-determination. Do you know yet, any of the ministers, how that's being used? And what else do we need to do to help First Nations people and communities move towards self-determination? If perhaps all 3 of you could give a quick answer, I'd really, really appreciate hearing from all 3 of you. Carolyn, do you want to go first? Minister Bennett?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think that we, as both Minister Miller and Minister Blair have the mandate now to move on First Nations policing. We have seen what has happened in Yukon, and we've seen the results when you have a more community-based approach. And I think that the kind of legislation that Minister Blair has committed to bringing in is the kind of legislation that changes it from just a program where we know over the years, even those with First Nations policing have worried every March whether the money would be there again or whether they'd be laying people up. So to move it to a statutory funding as an essential service will make a big difference in people having the confidence to go forward with designing, whether it's in their community or as a treaty group or as a regional force, to be able to do the things they know work well.
Thank you. Minister Van Dal?
Yes, that's a great question. And I think just generally, and I don't have a lot of detailed information on the initiatives Minister Blair is moving forward on, but I think just philosophically, self-determination and letting Indigenous nations take care of their own governance and just taking care of their own communities, whether it's child and family services, whether it's policing, whether it's health. I mean, that basic philosophy, I think, is going to bring many more positive returns than what we've been doing thus far. So it's time for a change.
Thank you. Minister Miller?
Yeah, and then as an equally overarching comment, I would say one of the observations, at least, that I've had in the small time I've had the honor to serve as Indigenous Services Minister is at some point you realize that the pace has to be dictated by Indigenous communities and not the reverse. And that means we talk on their terms, according to their priorities, and realize that there's not a one-size-fits-all, which is so self-evident. But you may go into a particular community and say this framework that we've proposed works perfectly. You may go into a different part of the country and say, no, we have a treaty basis and we would like to proceed along those terms. Or in a different part of the country where this gets rejected entirely and there's a different nature of discussion. This is something that self-evident to the communities you're discussing, but perhaps not to a number of well-meaning non-Indigenous people, including I would say myself a couple of years ago for sure. This is it's a long process. It is indeed sometimes frustrating, but it's something that I think this government's been dedicated to doing its best to get right. And it's something that requires patience. It requires dialogue, first and foremost, but also recognizing that those pillars that I mentioned in a response to Adam are so key in supporting, and they are pillars to identity and self-governance and nationhood that we take for granted, but are very important in fostering and continuing to foster in the right way.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Brings us 5 minutes. And next up is Jamie Schmale. Jamie, go ahead for 5.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I appreciate the testimony from all our witnesses. I guess my questions here are for Minister Bennett, if I could. Minister, according to your last departmental report, and I have it here, spending at CERNAC was estimated to drop by $1.5 billion by 2022-23. Now, obviously, that was pre-COVID. Can you tell us what the estimations are for spending over the next 2 years?
Thanks for that, Jamie. And I think that, as you know, as we transfer and move in terms of nation rebuilding to the kinds of investments that we're making, some of the money that we have is also for having settled land claims, settled these various court cases and land suits. So maybe I'll ask the deputy to let us know what he thinks is coming in terms of those obligations Canada has.
Sure, and in fact, I'll turn it quickly to the CFO, but obviously on the treaty obligations we have, we will continue to pay those out. As the Minister has noted, the work on MMIWG will absolutely be critical. The continuation of the conversations in reference to some of the points that Minister Miller made about listening to First Nations, to engaging and hearing what they want, crafting solutions that they see are appropriate to the particular priorities they have, those will be the most critical pieces. But perhaps for a little more technical look at it, I'll just pass quickly to our Chief Financial Officer, Annie Boudreau.
Oui, bonjour. Est-ce que vous m'entendez bien?
Can you hear me?
You'll remember when we went to present the supplementary estimate B, we had a big amount of about $1 billion for the loan forgiveness. So it was a one amount for one time. So you cannot find that this time around in the total main estimate because the amount was only for 1 year. So that will explain a big reduction from last year to this year.
So, Minister, in your latest departmental report, there were a number of targets that weren't hit, specifically the Indigenous Entrepreneurship and Business Development Program. So basically, it describes it as a dollar value of federal procurement contracts set aside for Indigenous businesses. Now, your target was 5%. Your actual result was 1.4%, and that was a target date of April 2019. Do you have an update on that?
I would have to ask to defer to the deputy or to the Chief Financial Officer for that.
Right, and certainly, again, following up on the question you'd asked last time on this front, we do have some further information. Some of these pieces have transferred now to Indigenous Services Canada as part of the work that we are doing, and I'll let our Chief Financial and Results Delivery Officer explain that in a little more detail.
Thank you very much for the question. So indeed, there was a order in council last year, and that transferred 2 programs from Crown Indigenous Relations to Indigenous Services Canada. And those 2 programs were land and economic development. And I think that the result that you're referring to has now been transferred to Indigenous Services Canada as part of the order in council of July 2019.
Okay, Chair, how much time do I have left? 1 minute. Okay.
1 minute.
Okay. Thank you. Minister, we've been told through Treasury Board that there is a new leave associated for public servants with COVID-19. Can you tell us how many in your department have taken advantage of this new leave, and what's the justification for these requests on average were given?
I firstly wanted to thank all of the public servants for how hard they've been working. As we say, there's a difference between working from home and being at home trying to work. And this has been extraordinary what the department's been able to do. But in terms of those that have requested leave, I would defer to the deputy.
Just a few seconds.
And in fact, the CFRDO has those specific numbers.
You're on mute, Ms. Boudreau.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Okay.
Yes, go very quickly, please.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So as of today, it is 3% of our workforce, and we are approximately 1,800 employees. So it's only 3%, and the reason will be to take care of kids at home or to take care of a sick person, a sick family member.
Thank you very much. Mr. Van Couverden, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And my question will be for Minister Van Dal. There are surprisingly connectivity issues in my riding, just 30 minutes from the Toronto airport. And so I can't imagine what some of the connectivity issues, how they've impacted people in your riding, and certainly people across the north who you represent. How will the investments that are in these supplementary estimates go to connect people living in the north and remote communities across Canada so that they can achieve better outcomes in health and education through telehealth and telelearning?
Thank you so much for that very important question. And I think if there's anything that we've learned through these difficult times is that we need to do a better job of making sure that we are building, constructing more internet communications, fiber optics throughout the north. I know that's it's a priority. Since I've been minister for about 6 months now, I've heard that quite often in my consultations. I can tell you that our government is spending billions of dollars over a 10-year period to improve connectivity in the north, in the Arctic, and in northern provinces. It's something that's absolutely essential. We're doing it in partnership with First Nations, with Inuit, with Métis communities, with rural municipalities. And as I stated earlier, it's something that really the benefit has really become apparent through these difficult times. When you look at the opportunities for education, the opportunities for the provision of health services to isolated communities, this can't happen fast enough. And I know there are several ministries within our government that have prioritized this, and there are literally billions of dollars over a prolonged period that's going to be invested in this service.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. How much time do I have remaining?
2.5 minutes.
Thank you. I would ask the same of perhaps somebody from the department, or recognizing that there's connectivity issues in other Indigenous communities that are not in the north. If Ministers Miller or Bennett have anything to say, or if somebody from the department can shed a little bit of light on how these connectivity issues are having an impact on education outcomes for kids.
Well, if I could just briefly say a few things. You're right, Adam. It isn't necessarily a remoteness issue. We've seen that in Six Nations, and Pam has been instrumental in making sure we're aware of that and that there is a response. This isn't necessarily our ministries. Minister Monsef is in charge of ensuring that we move forward on connectivity. Clearly, the needs when it comes to education, being able to study at home, having more people connected at the same time, they're more acute, and the disparities are greater the further you go north. But it isn't limited simply to to more northern areas, although that need is acute as well. There are reflections that we need to have as we deploy to make sure that deploy as part of our governmental undertaking in prior budgets to deploy connectivity solutions to communities and get people wired, particularly in a COVID environment where you have issues with contractors going in and making sure they're observing the proper protocols, but also that will be largely insufficient. And as we move forward, we have to continuing having that reflection, making sure people do have access to connectivity solutions.
When I've had the chance to engage with youth through the Canada I Want project or with the Prime Minister's Youth Council, mental health has been one of the #1 issues in that ability to connect and the ability to stay connected and to develop that sense of connection to people across the country has been something they've pointed out. So I'm happy to hear that it's on everybody's agenda. Mr. Chair, am I at time? Sorry, you're on mute. I'll concede the rest of my time, if any, to the NDP.
It's okay, fine. Something's gone funny with my space bar because that's my mic switch, but it didn't work that time. So apologize for that. We now have the 2.5-minute round of questioning. And Madame Berube, vous avez la parole.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is for Minister Miller. The Indigenous Services Canada, do you hope to give additional funding for Indigenous community support? And are there supplemental funds to face any second waves of the COVID-19 if it happens? Thank you. A two-tiered response. First of all, as far as the first question, you were talking about similar amounts that were provided for communities. That's a famous 350 million. And that was geared towards communities to make sure that they had the financial means from the federal government in order to make decisions to face any potential spread of COVID-19. And there were good results to show. But we cannot take anything for granted. We have to be ready for a second wave. There was an additional over $200 million to face the surge, so specific allocations for testing, for confinement, and that would be deployed strategically within the communities. And right now, we don't really know what the curve of the pandemic would be, just how far it can get. It's hard to assess the needs within the communities. But some of the needs that were expressed, be it in additional security or safety measures, additional envelopes to prepare and to take funding decisions that are primarily geared towards health. So that's the first part of your question. That's something we're looking into, but we're still using some of the envelopes that have already been granted. Thank you. Do I have any time left, Mr. Chair?
Est-ce que vous tenez des statistiques?
Do you have any statistics in relation to COVID-19 to face any potential second wave? We must have to look very closely at these data. We've heard that throughout the country, there is this discussion on disaggregated data. We have statistics to see how we can control, to analyze how resources are used in the reserves, and the provinces are sending us data. The communities are sending us data. This work is incomplete. It's not perfect, but it should allow us to come up with the right public health policies and to make better plans for the second wave. Thank you.
For 2.5 minutes, Ms. Kakak from the NDP, please go ahead.
Matna, thank you, Chair. Before I get into my questions, I will say it's been very difficult to listen to the conversations that have been going on and Indigenous experiences being discussed as if non-Indigenous peoples will ever be able to fully grasp what it means to be Indigenous in Canada. My questions will be for Minister Vandal. Could you tell me who is part of the decision-making process to determine what items are included and what is not in the subsidies for the Nutrition North program?
Thank you. Thank you for that important question. I think I do know actually that the Nutrition North program has an advisory committee. Nellie Cornwallier from, I believe, Northwest Territories, I hope I'm not wrong there, is the chairperson. I met with her recently, and there is a committee, the Nutritional North Advisory Committee, that meets regularly with the administration. They go over the parameters, the terms of reference. They were instrumental in the rollout, as was ITK, of the Harvesters Grant Program, which subsidizes Indigenous nations, individuals getting out on the land, subsidizes going back to traditional food gathering and hunting and fishing. And we take a lot of advice from the Nutrition North Advisory Committee.
Thank you for that. I know that it is supposed to include country food, but the barriers in that process are enormous, especially for people in Nunavut. My next question, I have a constituent from my hometown, Baker Lake, who wants to ensure that she is feeding her baby healthy foods. She had went to the local store and bought 2 6 ounces of raspberries and 2 6 ounces of blueberries, which ended up totaling $31.96. What reasoning would the minister suggest I give to a mother trying to feed her baby healthy foods at such ridiculous prices?
Listen, there's no good answer for that. I know that raspberries and strawberries, based on what you've just said, is really unaffordable. We are working closely with the advisory committee. We're working closely with people on the ground in the North and in the Arctic to try to make our programs better. An example of that is the Harvesters program. I have no doubt that there's much more we can do. So I would suggest you call my office or I'll call your office. We can have a further discussion on the ideas that you have to make Nutrition North a better program. I know there's opportunity, and there's nothing. I think a good partnership would benefit the citizens that you represent.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Minister. In fact, thank you to all of our ministers for appearing today. Thank you for the staff as well. And I also want to thank our clerk and the staff, the technical people who helped to get us through a very difficult day. This is, I don't know, I used to run marathons. This is a little tougher than Boston today, trying to juggle everything. But it all worked out, I think, for the benefit of broadening our knowledge, and that's why we're here. So thank you to all. And that will conclude our meeting today. So as your chair, I officially suspend this meeting. It's adjourned.
Thanks for accommodating, Chair.